Welcome back to another episode of the Crime Scene Insiders. I'm one of your hosts, Angela Davies, and I'm joined by my co-host, Dion Watson, and we're going to take you back under the barrier tape.
In today's episode, we are going to be discussing an international air disaster that is particularly close to both of our hearts, Flight MH17, which was shot down on the 17th of July 2014. And something some of you might not know about us is that, as well as being ex-CSIs, we are also disaster response consultants, and over the years we've worked on a number of international air disasters. We have just had the 12th anniversary of MH17, and this was actually the first major disaster that both of us have worked on. And we were involved with it for the best part of 18 months, so this incident has really stayed with us. And we wanted to bring it to the show and also honour the victims and their families. But before we get into our experience of MH17, for those of you that don't know this disaster well, we wanted to walk you through what happened on that day.
So on the afternoon of the 17th of July 2014, Malaysia Airlines Flight MH17 departed Amsterdam Schiphol Airport at 12:14 local time, bound for Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. It was a Boeing 777 carrying 283 passengers and 15 crew, so 298 people in total. The aircraft was cruising at 33,000 feet over eastern Ukraine, an area that at that time was in the middle of an active armed conflict between Ukrainian government forces and Russian-backed separatists. The airspace below 32,000 feet had been closed, but the higher altitude was still considered open to civilian traffic, and there had been a number of flights go over that airspace on that very same day. Sadly, at 16:20 local time, the aircraft disappeared from radar over the Donetsk region of the Ukraine, and contact was lost without any distress call. It later transpired that the aircraft had been hit by a Buk surface-to-air missile fired from separatist-held territory below. The warhead detonated near the cockpit and the flight crew were killed instantly, and the plane broke apart in the air. The wreckage came down across a huge area, around 50 square kilometres of farmland and villages in the Donetsk Oblast region. Sadly, all 298 people on board died. And among the passengers were 196 Dutch nationals, making the Netherlands the country hardest hit. There were also significant numbers of Australians and Malaysians on board, along with passengers from around a dozen other countries, many of who were travelling to attend the International AIDS Conference in Melbourne. Flight MH17 became the largest mass disaster victim identification operation ever conducted in the Netherlands, and it is still, to this day, the deadliest aircraft shoot-down on record.
So today, we aren't going to focus on the investigation, but what happens when a disaster of this scale occurs, and also our personal experience and the work that we carried out. Because we want to be very clear that we weren't part of the investigative team that was led by the Dutch Safety Board for the air safety aspects and the Joint Investigation Team who dealt with the criminal investigation side of things. Ange and I actually worked for a private company who was employed by the airline's insurance company, and we carried out other aspects of the disaster response work. So Ange, out of the two of us, you were the first one to receive a call to respond. Can you remember what that was like?
Yes, it was nerve-wracking. I've actually
Yeah.
just gone a little bit shaky inside, taking myself back to receiving that call and thinking about it.
Yeah.
And I think that working on disaster response is something that I'd always wanted to do. And of course, we'd had our interviews to work with this company and been through our training. And when the first call comes in, it's a mixture, I think, of a bit of shock, nervousness, and I hate to say it, but a little bit of excitement.
Yeah.
Not excited because a disaster's happened and lots of people died. That's not it. But if something like this does happen, then somebody's got to go and work on it. And this is the field and the arena that we chose. So, of course, all of a sudden you're getting that call to go and do something that you've always been passionate about and wanted to do. And I think that's more where the excitement comes from. just to be clear.
Yeah, because we often say that even with the crime scene work, don't we? We use the word excited, but we don't mean it in a disrespectful way. Like you say, you have to have a passion to work in these fields. It's some horrible environments. You see some horrific things. If you don't have that passion, I think it would be very difficult to deal with. So, yeah, I'm the
Yeah,
same
that's
as you.
it.
Yeah,
So I had the call, and sometimes, as we know, in response to these disasters, you get kind of a 24-hour turnaround, or they ask you if you can get out the country as quickly as possible. I actually had a couple of days to prepare for this, so a decent amount of time to pack. And initially, you're called to go for 2 weeks. So you do
yeah,
2 weeks on, and then you would come home. And a lot of people that work in this environment to some of the response stuff we were doing usually work full time other jobs, but we were obviously running our own business. So for us, we could go for 2 weeks or a bit longer, couldn't we? But initially, we were going for 2 weeks. And I remember I packed the biggest suitcase in the world. But like I said, I had a couple of days to turn it around. So I had time to pack, time to think about what I was taking. I remember I called the boss on the ground, which was actually our very own Angela Whitworth, who's been on the podcast
yeah.
before. So we'd only met her once before, but I gave her a ring and asked her if the team needed anything taken out. And that had come from a team work thing that we did even back at uni. Do you remember it?
I do. Yeah, team building exercise. Yeah.
Yeah, Gary Curry, who's also been on the podcast, he ran a team building exercise for us. And they gave us like lists of kit and equipment. And then it was things like tea and coffee and sandwiches and umbrellas and
Yeah.
warm clothing. And we had to essentially mark what we would take first, what would be priority. And everybody was thinking about all the kit and equipment and making sure everything was sorted. And the real lesson from it was think about your team, wasn't it?
It was, yeah, team welfare, because if you don't have that, you haven't got anybody responding if everybody's ill or can it function? So it is really key in this work, isn't it?
That's it, yeah. And it made me think about it as soon as I got the call. So I did call the team on the ground to see if anything was needed. Hilariously, as we'll probably come to this a bit later, but a bit further down the road, all we kept taking out was malt vinegar.
Malt vinegar. Yeah, yeah.
That was just
No,
us Brits, I think, wasn't it?
yeah, us Brits, nobody does vinegar on the chips like we do.
No, that's completely true. So random, but that's true. So yeah, I had the initial call. I was nervous. I was excited. I had a couple of days to turn around. I think that after I'd phoned the team on the ground, is there anything I can get or do? I phoned you and I was like, Dion.
Yeah.
And I think you'll be getting the call next because I think this is going to be a big job.
Yeah. And at that stage, can you remember what you were asked to do? What did you think your role was going to be when you arrived?
Oh, so when I was called out to work in personal effects. I think personal effects is a big part of disaster response that sometimes maybe gets overlooked or people don't think about it in the same way. And I guess I don't know that I did until this job. And I remember I did my master's in, it's a bit of a mouthful, but mass fatality management and victim identification. So it was a
Yeah.
DVI master's.
So you've got a
Master's
master's in
in
disasters.
disasters. But even then, we looked at the initial response, how you would go in, how you'd process a scene, how you'd record a scene, how it's a bit different to crime scene because it's on a much bigger scale, thinking about post-mortem and anti-mortem, setting up temporary mortuaries, the whole disaster victim identification response.
Yeah.
And I don't recall being taught anything about personal effects. So it was
No,
quite a shock to the system.
yeah. It's a side I hadn't thought of. Obviously, I haven't got the masters in the disaster arena, but I'd never thought of it. And it's a side you don't really hear talked about.
No. So yeah, I was called out to work on the ground to help in personal effects. And essentially, I imagine personal effects, the term itself speaks for itself, but it's people's personal effects, so things that they've had on them or things that have been in the suitcases or their handbags. And when a flight comes down, those personal effects, along with everything else, kind of gets spread across the site. And we need to
Yeah.
find a way to get them recovered, bring them into custody, and then record them and get them sanitized and hopefully get them back to the victims' families.
Yeah. And the scale of that's just massive, isn't it? As we've touched upon, there's nearly 300 passengers on board MH17. And if you think about every person is going to have a good number of items with them, you don't just have an item for each person. So you're going to have things like handbags, purses, wallets, and that's just the little items before you start considering a suitcase for if you're going away on holiday for a few weeks, and how many items we all carry within those. It's huge, isn't it?
It is, that's it. So I was called out for personal effects, but when I hit the ground, we didn't actually have the personal effects in our custody. And this was partly to do with the fact that the Dutch were conducting this investigation. So usually when an aircraft comes down, the country where the crash occurs leads the safety investigation. Now, with MH17, that was really much more complicated because obviously it came down in the Ukraine.
Right in the middle of that war zone.
And that was it. At the time, they were in conflict, they were fighting, and the whole area was being held by the rebels on the ground. So they were in control. So they were at war, but also they didn't have capacity to deal with an air crash of this size. And then, in addition, this actually became a criminal investigation as well, because as we know, it was shot down. It didn't come down for any pilot error or any issues with the aircraft. It was shot out of the sky. As a result, it became a bit of a political hotcake because nobody knew who was going to deal with this incident. And there was some debate about it for some time, wasn't there?
There was, like you say, because the Ukraine couldn't take it. So then there was question marks over would the Malaysians take it, because it was a Malaysian airline flight and it was bound for Kuala Lumpur. But then also that was quite a distance away, and for logistics, it was quite difficult for that to happen. But then it left from Amsterdam and we had the majority of Dutch passengers on board.
With Malaysia, they also had lost MH370 not long before MH17, so they were already suffering one air disaster when this also happened with MH17. So logistically, in terms of size, scale, and also getting everything back to Malaysia, really difficult. So it was decided in the end that the Dutch would take over this incident. But the Dutch, they were running the investigation side of it in terms of with the safety board, as we've mentioned, also the criminal aspect of it. And then they were also running the disaster victim identification process, that they were happy to do the disaster victim identification for all of the bodies. And then they sorted out funerals and returning people to families for the Dutch. But they had so much on their plate and so much that they were dealing with that that's where the company we were working for came in. And so after the identification process, once people had been identified, all non-Dutch nationals came to us, and it was decided that all personal effects would come to us as well. But it took some time and sorting out before they were able to hand over those personal effects. So when I actually landed and got there, I was taken to meet the incident director. And actually, it was recognised that the need for me in personal effects at that time was unnecessary because we didn't have them. But that the incident director had a lot of work going on and it was quite overwhelming. So I effectively, my role flipped and I became the PA to the incident director, which involved all sorts. The role was so varied, and for a first deployment, it was an amazing experience, I have to say.
It sounds quite daunting as well, but a fascinating experience.
It was, I think, for the first couple of days, I felt like I was out of my own body and completely out of depth and thinking it was just that full imposter syndrome. What am I doing here? What the hell am I doing? I haven't got a clue what's going on. Like, I had the incident director's phone, he just handed it to me and I started answering it. And just started having conversations and thinking,
there'd be some important conversations as well with very big agencies and people, very important people.
Well, a lot of it was liaising with embassies and government officials and setting up meetings. There was also setting up meetings with families and doing family liaison. Of course, we worked at a funeral home, so we would organise for victims' families to come. We were then organising funerals themselves, how they were going to happen and where they were going to happen, and how we'd repatriate victims home. And then it's the paperwork that goes along with that, and also making sure that everything's prepared in terms of the coffin being appropriate. People who get repatriated, they have to be in a lead line coffin, for instance. And then there's quite a bit of paperwork that goes along with it. So there was a lot of that kind of work. And I was also part of a team who worked on organising a mass repatriation of victims back to Malaysia. And that was huge. And that was one of probably well, I've got quite a lot of standout memories, but one of the earliest standout memories that still stays with me because it was just, yeah, so significant. So yeah, my role initially was to be personal effects, and then it ended up being something completely different. And that's the thing I think that you learn pretty quickly in disaster response work, is that you go where the need is and you use your skills to the best of your ability to do what you can, where you can.
Yeah. And that's one of the things when you go into this work, isn't it? You've got a real want to help. So
Yeah.
you do pivot and you do whatever's asked of you or whatever's needed at that time. And I think our CSI skills come in really handy here, don't they? They go hand in hand with a lot of the skills you need for disaster response. And that being able to pivot and just slot in wherever you needed is so important.
Yeah, because I was going from doing things like admin to being in high level meetings to then being in the mortuary and supporting the mortuary team and then doing some of the photography. It was literally just doing what was needed when I could, and then also liaising and dealing with some of the victims' families as well. And that I think was quite an emotional part of it.
It sounds it. We've talked
Mm.
before on the podcast, haven't we, of where you start dealing with the living and the emotion there, then that's where we find it a bit more difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, most definitely it is the hardest part. It's when you see somebody else's hurt and emotion, and you can't help but feel it for them. But of course, it's not your grief to carry, is it? You just want to
No,
do your best for them.
exactly. I think it's just the scale of the grief in this as well. It's not one or two family members that are involved. There's hundreds in an incident like this, and you deal with quite a few of them. So it's just the scale of it all, that grief.
It really is. So, like I said, I was initially supposed to be going out for 2 weeks. Because we work for ourselves, we had much more flexibility.
Yeah.
I did not come home, so I was really pleased that I packed the biggest, most stupid suitcase you've ever seen in your life. It was actually
Yeah.
bigger than me, and everybody took the piss out of me when I first arrived. It
Yeah,
was so funny. I think you could actually fit in it, couldn't you?
definitely.
I think
Yeah.
I could even fit in it.
It's one of those things though with for a disaster like this because like we say you don't know how long you're going to be there for. I say fortunately I'm not so sure, but for us we enjoy doing the work and because we did have that flexibility we could choose to stay longer if the need was there. And because of that you don't know what conditions you're going to be in and we were there through changing seasons.
Yeah.
So you needed so many different bits of clothes. So I also had a ridiculous case that I bought for going out there. It was huge. It's never been used since because it's just so ridiculous.
Mine has never been used since either. In fact, I think I sold it. Yeah, so my initial 2 weeks actually turned into, I think it was maybe 6 weeks or 2 months before I went home for a break. And
Yeah.
then I was phoning you, wasn't I, every night? And it
Yeah.
wasn't long
So
after
what's
that.
going on?
Yeah. And it wasn't long after that you got your call because actually things started to move with the personal effect. Do you remember receiving your call?
I had the call quite a bit before I was actually deployed because, like you say, we knew the personal effects were coming in and we kept thinking we were going to get them soon. So I was on standby. So I'd been on standby for quite a substantial period before I actually got called out, which even that in itself's a bit nerve-wracking because you don't want to make any plans or anything like that
Yeah.
because I'm going out, it's imminent, it's coming anytime. So you're packed, ready to go. But I was the same as you, excited, nervous, bit apprehensive about it, but I was looking forward to getting on the ground and starting the work because, like you say,
Yeah,
you just want to get there and start helping. So I was called out for the personal effect side of it, and I landed on the ground as that was just starting to come to us. So we'd acquired a space to start work on the personal effects. I was there from the airport hangar we were working in being this empty shell, a brand new
yeah.
space that had never been used before, full of dust from just not being used, the dust from the concrete on the floor, everything like that. And there from cleaning that out to get it into a sanitary space ready for the personal effects dropping on us. And that was such a strange experience, just having this huge empty space with nobody really there at that point, to those huge crates. We had massive crates of property arrived, didn't we?
Well, there's that. There's a couple of things about that, wasn't there? There was one, we thought we'd be working together, but actually, because I ended up in, well, I suppose what we called headquarters then, which was based at
Yeah,
Schiphol, and then you were down in Rotterdam.
yeah.
So we weren't actually working together, which we'd expected. So I think we were hoping for a bit of a comfort blanket, but that was blown away straight away, wasn't it?
Yeah, I remember arriving and thinking I would see you straight away, and I don't think I seen you till like very, very late on the night because we were just you were busy away paying and helping there. And actually, when I hit the ground, I was picked up, and we were meeting a family at Schiphol Airport where we had meeting rooms, and I went with one of the directors there and had a meeting with a family to help start making some funeral arrangements. And that was quite a shock to the system because I'd literally just landed and they're like, right, come with me. We've got a meeting. And we were straight off sitting with a family. And I was taking notes to make sure we didn't miss anything. And we had all of their requirements down. So that was quite a shock just landing and straight into
Straight into
business.
work. Yeah, talk about baptism of fire.
Yeah. And like as we've said, that the family liaison stuff, where I find it so rewarding, it has quite an emotional toll at times as well. And when you're not expecting it, I think maybe that was a bit better because you're not mulling it over
Mull it
and thinking
over.
about what's going to happen. It's like, right, I'm here. Let's get dealing with it.
Yeah. So at the time we had a mortuary team as well, but we didn't have a fully established personal effects team. So you're expecting a big multidisciplinary team, and at first it was quite small. And like you say, you're in that massive warehouse with just a couple of you.
Yeah, it was so strange because I think when I very first got there and we were starting to get the personal effects come in, there was myself, Ange, that we've talked about, and one other person at the beginning, and it was weird.
Especially when those crates arrived because they were massive, and you just think, how are we going to process this?
Yeah, and just starting it from scratch, I think that was really rewarding to see how it starts from the outset till we were there till the very end, weren't we? And it's just interesting to see how it progresses.
It really is. Well, you were saying there you did that initial clean down of that facility to sanitize it and get it ready. Almost 18 months later, we were there at the very end, cleaning it down and sanitizing it, ready to hand it back over to the airport.
It's
That
strange
was
experience.
it was
Very
that was a sad
somber.
time, that wasn't it? Yeah.
It is very somber. And then, of course, when you first receive the effects as well, you don't really know what condition anything's going to be in because we weren't involved with the recovery of. So you don't know how anything's going to be received. So you don't know what you're getting out of those crates or boxes when you receive them either.
No, and this is the other thing I think with MH17 that made it so complicated because it was in a war zone. It it made the recovery much harder. Like usually, whoever's running the investigation would take control of the area, and then it would be what we call zoned or sectioned off, and every area
Yeah.
would be recorded appropriately, searched appropriately, and then items recovered appropriately. And of course, recovered separately. You'd look at
Yeah.
recovering aircraft parts to go to the investigation. You'd look at recovering body parts. And the last thing you ever want is human remains commingling with anything else. You always want to
No.
be so respectful. And for those human remains to be dealt with and with care and dignity. And then there's the personal effects. And then, of course, there's airline property as well. So there's so much to think about in recovery.
Yeah,
Sometimes, depending on the incident and depending on how that initial recovery goes, impacts all the other stuff further down the line.
it has a huge impact.
And I don't even know if people at the outset think about that impact down the line either. But it was a
No,
difficult recovery in this incident. Oh my goodness, I'm just thinking back to the scale of it now, and the whole thing was so huge, wasn't it?
yeah. That warehouse, I remember when I first walked into it and it was empty, and I was just looking around like, wow. And I thought, we're not going to need all this space, surely. Surely not. And then as we started going through, as the weeks and months went on, and you start thinking, is this big enough? I don't know that we
Yeah.
have enough space, actually.
That's it, isn't it? Because it was just so big.
Huge.
And the idea of processing personal effects is to return them back to families, isn't it? The goal is that we sanitize them and clean them and get them into a good enough condition that they can be returned, because some items hold such huge sentimental value for families.
They
And
do.
so getting them back in a good condition can really help people in terms of their grief process, and also
Yeah.
sometimes bring in a bit of closure.
Definitely. And again, as we've said, we didn't really think about the personal effects side of it until we were involved with this. But I don't think sometimes people think about that sentimental side of personal effects. So, an item for us that might seem quite ordinary, for a family, if they have a story behind that, or that's something that their loved one carried around with them all the time, it holds such huge value for them. We don't know the stories behind any of these items. We were lucky enough that when we did do some repatriation of items to families, we got to see the impact that getting those items back meant. It was an honour to see how all of that hard work going in and cleaning items that sometimes some people might think, "Oh, it's a plain black comb. Like, who's going to really want that?" And then seeing when that gets returned to a family, actually what that means to them. It was a
Yeah,
real honour, and it made the work even more rewarding, I think.
it did. I have to say it's one of the most rewarding things I've done. And I think as well, often people consider the body to be the most important part. And of course, it is important. It should take priority. People need that identification. People need to hold funerals. But actually, once you've had that funeral and the body's gone, it's gone. Whereas a personal effect is something physical, something that belonged to that person that you love, something that meant something so much, something you can have back, you can hold, you
In
can
hold.
touch.
Yeah. Because in these incidents, can be the case that the bodies aren't in condition where families can view. If they cannot see the person, to then get some of their items back can act as a closure and can be something that can keep with them. So it does mean a hell of a lot to them to get these items back.
Yeah, because at times some of the conditions that the bodies are in, the best advice to families would always be not to view, because it's not the last thing you want to see or remember.
No, definitely not.
And actually, sometimes, very sadly, they're unrecognizable. And I think that to view would cause more trauma than anything.
Yeah. And that goes across any disaster work, really, doesn't it? Not even
Yeah,
just specific to this. The bodies can be in bad condition if they are a whole body, but quite
yeah,
often we don't have whole bodies either. And sadly, sometimes people don't get the whole body back. They could just get parts. So this is where I think this really does come into the fore and become so important, that somebody's got that lasting memory and they've got something that they can hold and keep with them.
Well, like you said, we were there from the beginning of the personal effects processing right to the very end, and we saw a lot. And then we did get to meet a couple of families and return these items to them and see just exactly what it meant. remember one family was so lovely, and we always do it with as much care and respect as we can. Like, we often say, we'd be happy to sit with you while you open them. We can talk you through anything that you need to know about the process, or any questions you may have about any of the work that we've done, or we can leave you, because we have to get them to check that they've got everything that they wanted and they requested, and that they still want to keep it before we leave, essentially. But
Yeah,
one of the families wanted us to stay with them and sit kind of in there in a circle, and we're holding our hands, weren't they, as they were going through it.
yeah. And there was a lot of them there as well.
And it was, so just like you said, such an honor. It was really humbling. It was really emotional, and something
Yeah,
I think that will stay with me forever.
me too. And I think one of the things that sticks in my mind with that as well is that was the same family that when I landed on the ground in the first instance, it was their loved one I helped arrange the funeral arrangements for.
It's
So
so weird the way some of those things happen.
it really is. So to be able to meet them in the beginning and then still be there when their loved ones' bits were all together to be returned, it felt really lovely because it's a familiar face for them then as well.
Yeah.
So it feels a bit more personal. That was a real honour. But like you say, it's an emotional time, but you've got to remain so professional when you're in that moment as well, because like you say, that's not our grief. It's not our loved one. So you have to stay professional, but human still. You don't want to
Yeah.
come across this robot
Like a
who has
robot.
no compassion, or it's a fine line about how you hold yourself in those moments.
Yeah, because sometimes, as we've talked about, as crime scene investigators, you detach to be able to function and do your job.
Yeah,
But then when you're dealing with families like this, that detachment can only go so far, because, like you say, you don't want to come off as cold or detached or like a
yeah.
robot. And actually, this is a very human experience. And I think that sometimes, and that I remember that family in particular, that when we're talking about, felt connection to their loved one through the personal effects, but also through us, because we'd worked on it and processed it and helped get them to where they were.
And that, like you said, it's strange how some of these things follow you because I remember as we were working through the process, seeing items and thinking that belongs to that family and just knowing that it belonged to them. But like you say, it follows you around some families.
Yeah, they really do. I had a couple like that as well, who I'd worked on in terms of helping repatriate the remains and organise funerals. And then when I got to personal effects, I kept seeing their personal effects and coming across them all the time. And
Yeah,
people might think that sounds a bit strange. You think, oh, well, you'd expect to. No, there's 298 people with, like Dee said, all these bags, purses, suitcases, all of the cargo. Like, there's thousands of items. So you wouldn't necessarily come across one particular families all the time. It was just strange the way it happened. And obviously, work at this scale requires a multidisciplinary team,
it does.
but it also requires a lot of people. And like we said, because we work for ourselves, we were fortunate and we were flexible. So we did a lot more time on this job than some. Some people
Yeah.
would come out for 2 weeks and then leave, and that would be it. Some would come for 2 weeks, leave, and then a couple of months later try and come back and do another couple of weeks. Others could stay a bit longer, like we could. But every couple of weeks, there were people in and out of that team
which
constantly.
which I think surprises people as well when they think about this work because disasters, thankfully, don't happen every day. This isn't a lot of the people who work in those teams full-time jobs. So people have other jobs and they're on call for this sort of work. So you can get a phone call any day, time, and get asked to deploy. But you do have other commitments around it. So, like you say, for a lot of people, it's my employer will allow me to leave for 2 weeks to come out. They'll drop in, do this, and then drop back home again. But that in itself possesses challenges because
Yeah.
then you have a change in team, you have change in skills coming in all the time, you have different personalities, different cultures, and that can create a lot of challenges because for a lot of people, like for us, it was our first deployment. And this was such a huge deployment over such a long time that actually a lot of people that were being deployed, it was their first one as well. So there was a lot of
Yeah.
on the ground training. happening. Of course, we all have training around this and we'll have annual training, but you never actually know what that deployment's going to look like until you hit the ground, do you?
No, and I think that you can do training and simulation as much as you want, and it is really important, but actually it never really mimics it. Every disaster is completely different.
Yeah.
And all the circumstances and the environments are different. So you can train as much as you want, but you can't prepare for absolutely everything. You can put some like gold standard processes in place and you can
Yes.
implement those processes. But in terms of who you're going to be working with, the environments you're going to be working in, some of the challenges that come with that, logistics sometimes are just completely out of your control.
Even things like when you hit the ground, who's going to be your supplier? Do you speak the language? Do you have someone who is au fait with the culture that you're working in? There's so much to consider that you just cannot replicate.
Do you have drivers? Can they drive in that
Yes.
country?
Yes.
How we're going to get people to and from the airport, hotels, where we're going to put everybody.
Yeah. And hotels, when it's long term, can we negotiate some better deals?
There's a lot to think about in housing a big team and completing a project of this scale.
And how are you going to keep your supplies of malt vinegar up?
Everybody coming in, bring malt vinegar.
Yeah, did become a bit of a joke, didn't it? People would ring and be like, is there anything the team needs? And there would be some supplies that, but anyone from the UK coming had a request of that.
Yeah. The other thing that I don't know if people realize, but when you first hit the ground on something like this and you're responding, initially you don't get a day off. So when you deploy for those 2 weeks, you're deploying for 2 weeks straight. There's no consideration of a day off. And I think that's sometimes why they keep it to 2 weeks as well, because it's hardcore, isn't it?
It is.
7 days a week, and it's long days as well.
Yeah, because you want to get things done, obviously, as best quality as you can do, but you also want to get this done at pace for the families.
So there's no days off. And actually, we were out there for a couple of months. I think that I didn't get a day off until my first day off was after a month.
Yeah, because I think when they started to realise actually some of us could do longer, that's when days off started to come in. And as you had more people on the ground, that became more viable that you could be like, okay, we need people to rest up because you don't want people getting sick or ill because it is all butts to the ground, isn't it? And intense, yeah, for the time you're there.
And I think that when you first get there, you go at a pace and you're okay with it. But actually, when you are staying out longer term, there's much more chance of you becoming a bit knackered and burnt out. You do start to need a break. But I think adrenaline keeps you going at first.
Adrenaline, interest in the work and just wanting to do your best. And
also as the team grows, it's that team camaraderie as well. That keeps you going. We've literally met some of our best friends who'll be friends for life on the disaster work that we've done.
We have.
We've always said out of all the awful things we've seen, it is still some of the most rewarding work we've ever done. And actually a good thing for us personally to come out of it has been some of the friendships that we've made over the years.
It is. Like you say, we've got friends for life out of that who are more like family, really.
Yeah, and also all over the world, so it helps make travel cheaper as well.
Yeah, for our international friends who are coming to visit.
We've met a lot of people, which is a
really
blessing.
Lovely. It is a blessing out of it, definitely.
Is there any one thing that stayed with you most over the years on this one?
I think so many aspects of it, because it was the first, it was a shock to the system, seeing the scale and actually seeing all the processes in place. But I think for me, the thing that definitely has stayed with me is the work with the families and seeing how important those personal effects and those returns are. That has really stayed with me. How about yourself?
One of the things that I mentioned earlier is probably the mass repatriation that we did back to Malaysia. That was a real team effort in terms of getting everybody prepared and getting all the paperwork prepared, getting everything lined up, and then getting all the victims sadly back to the airport ready to be loaded onto the aircraft to be taken home. And I remember we had all of these coffins lined up and then all draped in flag. And all of it, I'm getting goosebumps now thinking about it, and it still makes me a bit emotional. All of us, like when we realized, yeah, everything's done, we've done a good job here, it's time for them to go home. We've done our very best by them. And then we all stopped and had a couple of minutes silence for respect before they got loaded onto the aircraft. And for me, it was just, I think, seeing coffin after coffin after coffin, but then also seeing them draped in the flag. I don't know what that was. I don't know why that impacted me so much. I don't know if it's something to do with pride or patriotism or respect. I think it's more about respect for the victims
Yeah,
that
because
they
I
were
think that
draped in their home flag.
because I can imagine and seeing that being very impactful and it looking respectful and thinking we've done our very best for these people and now we're getting them home.
They're going home.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh.
see, even when I say
Oh, I know, can feel it.
Mm.
It does sound very impactful. I'm not surprised that stayed with you.
I can still put myself back in the airport hangar, and I can still
Yeah.
see it. I can close my eyes, see it, and it's still like physically, I still kind of get goosebumps, and I still feel quite the weight of the heaviness. I know 298 people died, but we didn't have them all immediately in the vicinity. But
Together. Yeah.
that was a lot of people in a coffin ready to go home. It was a lot of death that you faced with all at once. And
Yeah.
that, I think, impacts the reality of it. Up until that point, we've been working like dogs. It was really fast and fast
Yeah.
paced. And a lot of good stuff had happened to that point. And I have to say that initial part was an amazing experience for me, if challenging at times and out of my comfort zone. I did it. I went from having imposter syndrome to think, yeah, I'm doing it, to I can do this. You can drop me anywhere you want in a disaster and I'll do it. I'll work it. So I went from imposter syndrome to confidence in myself. And
I
that
love
was
that.
a good feeling. And I still feel that. I still feel if you drop me into a disaster situation, I could literally go and work anywhere and apply my skills. And I would do my very best, and I'd do a good job.
Yeah. You would, and you are a very adaptable person. I think
Thank you.
you are. I think you need those skills for again CSI work, but in the disaster context, it's just a whole new level.
And then there's parts of the personal effects that, will always stay with me, that got me. That process was incredible, and to be there till to the end. I think one of the biggest things was me, you and Ange at the end, being out that airport hangar, sanitizing it and locking the door for the last time.
Oh, I know that breaks my heart a
I'm
little
gonna make us
bit.
cry.
Uh,
I
it,
know.
the thing is, it's
That
so
was emotional.
lovely. It's lovely to see it because you know that's this bit of the process done, and then you've got everything back to the families that can go back. So it feels lovely. But when you've been so ingrained into something for 18 months, it does feel so strange to lock that door and just walk away and then slot back into your
Normal
everyday
life.
life, come back home and be like, what now?
Well, that's it, isn't it? And I don't think we thought about that ever when we decided that we wanted to do this work. That wasn't a consideration whilst we were out there doing it. And when we got the first call, I don't think that was ever a consideration until we got home and had to just slot back into normal life.
No,
It is so difficult, isn't it? In
strange.
so many respects, it's so difficult. I think that when we locked that door and the three of us left, the three of us had a cry together, didn't we?
Yeah.
But
That
then,
last flight back out of Schiphol. So
yeah,
strange.
it really was. But trying to fit back in, like one of the things is we lived in a hotel for so long, so you had your laundry done, you had your food prepared, you
Yeah.
had your room cleaned. All of a
Yeah.
sudden, you get home, and yeah, mate, what do you mean I'm expected to do my own washing?
Why
Why
have I
isn't
got
somebody
nothing
bringing
to
me?
wear?
Yeah, is nobody going to feed me today?
Yeah, it's strange, isn't it?
But I think as well, like the work that you're doing is so important and it means so much. And then also you've been working in such a lot of death, like you've seen the impact and the results of so much death for so long that when you get home, things just seem a little bit more trivial, don't they? I remember feeling a bit irritated. People would complain about little things, and I think, are you kidding me?
I know. Yeah. Yeah.
And trivial things just didn't seem to matter as much anymore. I mean, we're all human, and then like probably a couple of months down the line, even I'm probably back to whinging about the same trivial thing.
Yeah.
But just initially, you're thinking, do you have any clue?
Like, are you
Like,
serious? Yeah.
yeah, you've got nothing to whinge about. Shut up. A
Yeah.
little bit of intolerance for some of that, I guess, as well. But it's also
Yeah,
trying to get back into a routine, isn't it, with work? Like we had our business and it was trying to get back into a routine with the business. And it was really hard for both of us, I think, at first.
it was. It almost felt like starting from scratch again, just getting yourself jigged back up for it to be your everyday again.
Because we kept our commitments and we'd fly home and do whatever work we needed to in the business and then fly back out. But it wasn't the same, like the core and the importance. It kind of became our everything really for that period. And I don't know if that was like rightly or wrongly. I think probably a bit wrongly actually, because it was so important to us and it did become our very core
It
that I
did.
think we lost sight of other things at times.
Yeah. And and the thing is, though, looking back, I don't know that I would change that either
I don't
because
think I would.
we had such a great experience in terms of feeling like you'd done something really important. It was so rewarding that I wouldn't change being there for as long as we were there.
No.
It felt good to do, and you felt like you were really invested in it and doing the best for the families. And we ended up actually going into supervisorial roles, didn't we? And helping to
Yeah.
train new people coming through and just making sure that everything was done to kind of a quality and a standard. And that was really lovely to see.
Like you say, we were made up to team leaders, or sometimes we'd cover if Ange, the manager, was off.
Yeah.
And to see people coming in all nervous, and then for us to help guide and train them and help them in their process,
Yeah.
and then see them leaving like more confident and having had a good experience, that was
Yes.
really nice.
That was lovely, wasn't it?
It just made people feel comfortable when they're away from home, because I think for us it became home from home. When I
Yeah.
went home, I missed Holland.
Yeah.
In fact, when we first got back for good, I really missed Holland. I missed living there.
Yeah. It's an experience like no other.
I think that might be a good place to wrap this up, really. I think we could
Me
talk all
too.
day about this and we've missed out so much. We maybe do
We
a
have.
follow-up episode, but also if anybody has any questions, like there's so much work that we did and there's more detail and there's probably more details about the crash we could go into, but we literally will be here all day. So if anyone does want to ask us any questions, they're more than welcome. I think that people might like to know where things are at with the investigation, because obviously this was a criminal act. The flight was shut down and the investigation took quite a number of years. So it was 2014 when the flight came down, and it wasn't until 2022 that a decision was made on the criminal verdict,
Yeah.
which is a long time, isn't it?
A hell of a long time.
So on the 17th of November 22, the District Court of The Hague actually convicted 3 men of murder for their role in shooting down the flight. And the court found that the plane was hit by the Russian-made Buk missile. And all 3 men were convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment, but in absentia, because they've never actually been there. And they were ordered to pay over 16 million euros in compensation to victims and families. I'm not sure that's going to have happened.
No, it hasn't.
There was a fourth defendant as well who was acquitted, and that was due to insufficient evidence of his direct involvement. And the Dutch prosecutors declined to appeal, making the verdicts final, though the convicted individuals do still remain at large in Russia, and Russia is refusing extradition.
And then last year, we had an update where on the 9th of July 2025, the European Court of Human Rights issued a landmark judgment holding the Russian state responsible for the downing of MH17 and resulting in the deaths of everyone on board. The court ruled that Russia exercised overall control over the separatist forces in 2014 and therefore violated international human rights laws. And this is the
Yeah.
first time that an international court has found Russia guilty of human rights abuses stemming from the 2014 conflict and provides a legal basis for further compensation claims against Russian state.
This is massive, isn't it? And this flight
Huge.
and the shooting down of this flight, it was unprecedented in so many ways.
It is absolutely huge. But sadly, Russia has filed an appeal with the International Court of Justice in The Hague, and they have rejected the ruling outright. And they have argued that the rules don't apply because it's during an armed conflict and that the original investigation was also biased.
Unbelievable.
It is. So Russia had a deadline to put in its formal submissions, and that was the 29th of June this year. So it has literally just passed, with Australia and the Netherlands due to respond by the end of January next year, 2027. So sadly, we are still looking at years realistically where any final judgment and full justice for the victims and their families can be brought about.
Which is just devastating. Like they've been through enough. Like say years down the line, 12 years down the line, the victims and families still haven't had actual justice. One thing that we should add is that there is a memorial in the Netherlands for the victims of MH17. And it's a really beautiful
Yes.
memorial. So if anyone's ever there, it's worth going and checking out.
It is. It's in a park just near Schiphol Airport, so it's very accessible if anyone does want to go and visit, and it is beautiful.
It's really moving as well. Okay, I think we'll wrap things up there. It's been nice reflection, interesting to look back and also a bit emotional. So thank you for those that have listened.
Thank you to everyone for tuning in. And like Ange says, it has been a bit emotional reflecting on all of that, but we really hope that you found it interesting. Please remember, if you're enjoying the show, like, subscribe and share. All of that will be very much appreciated. And we will be back in a fortnight's time where we will take you back under the barrier tape.